Good evening. My name is Jonathan Stickland. I'm a recovering politician and I've been clean for 6 days. And it feels really, really good. I don't have to wear a suit anymore. I don't have to hold back. I don't have to worry about who I'm taking a picture with. I don't owe anybody anything. For the last 8 years, I've had the privilege of working in the Texas House. When I ran the first time, I was a 27-year-old high school dropout with a GED, taking on a 16-year incumbent with over $1 million in the bank. A great ballot name, his name was Todd Smith, which is much better than Stickland, Strickland, how do you spell this? I don't know. But I knocked on over 10,000 doors and I looked people in the face and I said, we've got a problem. And the biggest problem that we have is we've got a bunch of people down there who are campaigning as one thing and then doing something completely different. And that's why I think you're here tonight. How many of you are sick and tired of campaign conservatives? How many of you are sick and tired of sending down a Republican majority and your taxes going up and your freedoms being stripped and your churches being closed and everything else that's happening to you? It's a real problem. It's a real problem. I learned very quickly down in Austin that every single one of us would have a choice to make. You get to choose. Are you going to be popular in Austin? Or are you going to be popular back home? Because it's not compatible to be both. You have to choose who you care about, whose opinion matters. And over the course of the last 8 years in dealing with hundreds of different elected officials, I found one common thing that every single one of them are good at. What do you think it is? That's definitely the underlying issue. It's not giving a good speech. It's not, doing this, doing that, being right on the policy, da-da-da-da-da. The one common thing that every single one of them are good at is reading a room. That's strange, right? How many of you guys have been to a Republican club or some kind of group before and heard people speak and think, that's a good guy right there? Raise your hand. How many of you have seen them in different audiences other than a Republican club? Sometimes you don't see the same thing. You see, we all know that when we get up on this stage, it's a safe place to be conservative. Now, we get a little bit nervous when all these cameras and things are pointing our way, because then we start to wonder who's watching on the other end. But this is a safe place to talk about constitutional carry and talking about a parental's right to figure out if their kids are going to be shot up with a vaccination or not, or talk about the sanctity of life. These are all safe issues to talk about here. But most of the people that you have heard go and say something different when the room is different. When they're together, we hear about things completely different. And one of the most illuminating concepts to me, and I know these two guys over here, is we very often share the same stage with other politicians, and we actually get to see it. I see them when you're talking to the Chamber of Commerce and people who want crony capitalism and they want tax abatements and they want the government to pick winners and losers because they think they have an edge. And then I see them go over here and talk to the entrepreneur who just wants a level playing field, wants a chance to work harder and innovate and bring these things to the marketplace and succeed. And most politicians have the ability to go back and forth between two things. On church, they can quote God, but when they're in front of Democrats, they can drink whiskey and curse and do all of these things. It's amazing how people have been able to adapt. But the thing about it is they are able to read their surroundings. And that's what Senator Huffines was talking about when he said, what are we going to give the grassroots? What are we going to decide when they're in the back rooms and they're having these discussions? They're trying to figure out what they can give you to keep you quiet. What is just enough to get you to not show up and cause a problem? What's the least amount of boat rocking you will go for and stay quiet? It's very easy for us to sit up here and talk about all these politicians who have let us down. But understand, most of them have been reading the room, reading the comments, looking at your actions, looking at the finance report, look who shows up to vote, and they have concluded that you don't matter as much as the other people. The people in Austin and the lobbyists have more to offer them than you. And that's a hard reality for some of us to accept. But it's the truth. They have concluded that being in the middle and not sticking their head out is the safest place to be. And it is for a lot of people. Because it's uncomfortable to be out here far on the right and talking about issues. Or on the left. You see, there's this political theory called the Overton Window. Has anybody heard of it before? I'll give you a quick lesson here. You've got a sliding scale. Picture a line. And on this side you have conservative. On this side you have liberal. And your public policy is always going to come in the middle of those 2 points. All your public policy and the things that are actually going to get done are going to come from the middle. Why? Because the middle is the safest place. That's where most of the politicians are going to be. That's the safe zone. So how do you change and actually get policy done? Well, you've got 2 different options. You either take the conservative side and go as far down there as possible, which moves that Overton window to the middle, or you cut off this part of the left is absolutely unobtainable and crazy and redraw that line. And that bar of the Overton window is going to move in between. Those that are playing politics understand that that's the game. And that is why they have demonized the people on either end. How many of you do not like AOC? Raise your hand. Bad news for this country, correct? Absolutely. She is leading the Democrat Party and setting the liberal agenda. That woman, whether she knows it or not, has more political power and say of what policy is actually happening than Nancy Pelosi or any of the Democrat leadership. Because she has successfully taken that line of the rhetoric and gone so far left that she has shifted the Overton window. That's why we have to cut her off as not being part of it and say, she's absolutely crazy. But she is actually deciding more about policy than anyone that is in that middle spot. Everyone understand where I'm going with this? Well, guess what the other side is trying to do to conservatives? That Jonathan Stickland, Matt Rinaldi, Don Huffines, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, they are so far right, they are crazy, they shouldn't even be on the spectrum. They are trying to cut them off as irrelevant because it shifts it back the other way. For 8 years, I went up there and stopped more bills on the local and consent calendar than anyone in the history of Texas. For 8 years, I called more record votes and brought more transparency to the process than any other representative down in Texas. We passed numerous amendments, including a ban on red light cameras, which hopefully you all enjoy here. But do you understand? I made the calculation and understood that I could do these things because of the people that were behind me.
Yes.
Joe Straus, Dennis Bonin, the Austin lobby, these people who came against us wanted us gone. And it would have been fun to do it once. But the only reason we got to do it for 8 years was because I had an army behind me that supported us and fortified us and made sure that when we were down there on the far right, we were surrounded, we were relevant, and we were protected. And it was from people like these 2 women right here, Molly and Pat, who everyone in the district knew no matter what, they would show up. They were going to be relevant. They had my back. And Austin figured out after a while, oh my gosh, this isn't just some crazy representative from Bedford, Texas, who's lost his mind causing all these problems. There's tens of thousands of people behind him who are crazier than he is. What we have to do, folks, is understand the truth. And I brought no notes tonight because it messes me up when I have to have an agenda, but I brought a quote. I'm going to read it now, I'm going to read it at the end, because I want you to understand this. It's a quote by Dr. Milton Friedman. Ever heard of him? He said, "I do not believe that the solution to our problem is simply to elect the right people. The important thing is to establish a political climate of opinion which will make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing." The wrong people do the right thing. Now, for the past 8 years, I've spent a lot of time in the conservative movement. I realized very quickly after being elected that there was going to be zero chance of me getting anywhere substantial for our movement in Texas by myself. So one of the things that we did was go around and help local groups raise money, develop fundraising efforts, developing donors, recruiting candidates, training them, doing all these things. We did all this across the state. Many of you were a part of it. We needed backup. And I personally stood on stage and vouched for dozens of different candidates across Texas, raising millions of dollars to help them, thinking that they would go down there and do the right thing. A couple of them have, but I will tell you the mass majority were a disappointment. Most of them I've had to turn around and apologize for vouching for. Some lasted a term or two. Some instantly went over to the other side. Each story is a little bit different. What I have realized over the last 8 years is very simple. We're never going to get 76 right people to change this state. What we can very easily do is realize we've already got more than 76 selfish politicians who, if they conclude that they have to do something because you make them, because you demand it, will do exactly what we want them to in a heartbeat. Joe Straus, one of the most liberal, the guy is a Democrat, Speaker of the House for 10 years, passed one of the most sweeping pro-life legislation in the history of our country. We banned abortion at 20 weeks. How many people remember that? It was a big deal. Wendy Davis did the filibuster and all these crazy people showed up down there. Worse, 10 times worse than anything we saw in Washington, D.C., I'll tell you that. People were taking dumps in bags and throwing them at legislators and chanting "Hail Satan" in the rotunda of the Capitol. We were there. Jeff, you were there. You saw it. DPS had some of us park in a different spot and had to bring us in secret entrances just to get to the floor to vote. It was crazy time. But Joe Straus was the Speaker of the House when we passed that bill. He's on the record being against abolishing abortion. Why did he pass the bill? Because he went around and he concluded that he had to. He had to do it to survive. If Joe Straus is capable of determining that he has to do the right thing, even though he's the wrong guy, then we've got hope. We've got hope. You see, right now, this group, this live stream, the pictures that will be on Facebook in a couple of hours, us all tagging each other, is about to start a process that many of us may not be aware of. Representative Leach was nice enough to be here tonight to see what is going on, but every elected official in Collin County is going to take a look at this room and make an evaluation. They're about to decide whether this group is going to matter or not.
We do.
They're about to decide whether this is a group of people who came for a couple of speakers, or if this is a group that's going to organize and demand conservative legislation going forward. They are going to determine group that they have to show up to or not. They have to do this stuff. That's their job as elected officials. So understand, for the first time, for some of you, you may be just getting this, but you're being constantly evaluated by your elected officials. And it's not just about money. I guarantee you that every elected Republican in Collin County knows who the players are. They know who influences 10 votes, 20 votes, 100 votes. They know the pastors whose endorsement and blessing matters. They know the donors in Collin County and the business owners that they've got to go see to get the check mark. This has all been determined. And guess what? For the last couple of years, we have not been the people that matter enough. Collin County 6 years ago was the bastion of the conservative movement and sending hell-raising conservatives who were going to fight down to Austin, up to Washington, doing these things. And now we have one here.
Fire-breathing dragons.
There's one.
Who?
And Jeff, we need you to...
It's not Jeff.
But I'm just telling you, we have one. So what are you going to do about it?
Bring a rope.
We can sit around and talk about... how crappy each one of them are and how they lied to us. And that may make us feel better. We can throw our shoes at the TV. We can yell at them on Facebook. Or you can become politically relevant and a force to be reckoned with.
Yes.
And you can make the wrong people do the right thing. Here's what I've noticed. It's kind of funny. There were a couple of different situations in the last few years where an issue would come up, and I would talk to people who had totally been an enemy of doing anything real conservative. And they would come up and say, I don't want to take this controversial vote. I don't want to. This is what they're saying for months. I don't want to have to do that. Can't we just make it go away? And then all of a sudden, those same people, when it's time to vote, are like, I've been a champion the whole time. Give you a prime example. How many of y'all have heard about our effort to ban abortion at the city level, making sanctuary cities for the unborn across Texas? We now have a couple of dozen that have done that, okay? That came off an amendment that I threw onto a bill at the end of last session. And it was a surprise vote. I didn't tell anybody. We came up with this idea that said, this bill had nothing to do with abortion whatsoever. And we thought, well, liberals are doing all this crazy stuff at the city level, right?
Yeah.
They're doing it over and over and over again. So why can't we do it?
Right.
Just for once, let's just take a couple of conservative cities and see what happens. So this bill comes along, and I have this little amendment that it literally said this. This bill does not prohibit municipalities from banning abortion. It didn't, for anyone that knows anything about legislation, this was not like granting them anything. We just acknowledged that this bill didn't stop it. And everyone went, wow, you mean we can do that now? I don't know, maybe let's try it. And they started to do it. But let me tell you guys something. That day on the Texas House floor, when I popped that amendment out, they freaked out. And I'm not talking about Democrats. No Democrats said anything to me. But I had at least 20 Republican representatives who came up to me. And it went anywhere from, please don't do this, Jonathan, please, to, you piece of bleeping, bleep, 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 I'm gonna kick your bleeping. I mean, they were mad, begging me.
What are their names?
One of them is Dustin Burrows, okay?
Keep going.
Dustin Burrows is now in the city of Lubbock, pushing the city of Lubbock to ban abortion in Lubbock, and he started a PAC to support it. This guy looked me in the eye and said, if you do this, you're dead to me, Stickland. We're coming after you. And now he is the champion of banning abortion in Lubbock. Greg Bonin, who has literally carried pro-life legislation, been named a champion by different pro-life groups, threatened me, yelled at me, and kind of freaked me out a little bit, honestly. He had this just like crazy look, but you better not do this. And I'm like, dude, I'm doing it. You need to buckle up. You should go sit down because we're not backing down. But guess how many of these people who begged me not to do it voted against it? None. I talked to Brian Slayton just a couple of days ago. He had a couple of rule amendments that were awesome.
Yes.
He had people come up to him begging him not to prioritize abolishing abortion over renaming a highway. Yelled and screamed at him and told him, don't do this, you better not go through with it. And then they voted with him. They voted with him. This is what is going on in Austin. This is what we are up against. But here's the good news. They're watching y'all. They're watching every single one of you, and they're evaluating you. And what they're trying to figure out is, are you going to be capable of making the wrong people do the right thing? And one of the things that they are going to use to evaluate is the success of this effort right now. Raise your hand if you're one of the founding members of Collin County True Texas Project, putting this thing together. These patriots have stood up and drawn a marker and said, we're going to do this. And it's great that we've had a huge room. People are flowing out there. Thank God the fire marshal hasn't been called. But what's the second meeting going to look like, folks?
Bigger.
What about 6 months from now? What is this group going to be doing? The good news is there's no elected official that has any say over the answer to that question. It's up to you. And I'm just telling you guys right now that one of the reasons that we are focused on pushing these in-person meeting groups is because if you don't think that big tech is about to silence us on Facebook and the things that we have enjoyed and the things that we have pushed and the communities that we have built are at risk of not existing anymore. They know that we have power on that and they're going to destroy it. And we are going to have to get back to the basics. And I'm just telling you guys right now, those of you who know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior know what I'm about to say. These are spiritual battles that we are fighting. We know how this ends. Now it's about us being obedient or not. And I'm just going to tell you this right now, that if you and your family and the ones that you love and care about are not in a physical meeting place at a church every week and a part of a local conservative group who's holding people accountable, then you are not ready for what is about to face this country. We can sit around and we can blame all the politicians that we're mad at, but we better have our own houses in order. You need to get out of debt. You need to get into physical shape, which is what my wife's killing me about right now. You need to be prayed up. You need to make sure that your kids have accepted Christ. You need to make sure that your neighbor has their needs met instead of asking them to go stand in line at a government agency. Government has effectively pushed out the church and we have let them. And if you want it to stop, then you personally are going to have to do something about it.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the True Texas Project in Collin County can be something magical, but it's going to be dependent on you. And you have patriots like myself who are rooting you on and praying you up, and I hope that you are ready, and I would not rather do battle with anyone else than the folks that I've seen in this room. Let's go out there and fight for the truth. Let's be obedient to the Lord, and let's get these politicians, every one of them that is wrong, to start having to do the right thing. God bless you, God bless Texas, and God bless the future of this group.
That was great.